Hope everybody had a good week. I was really hoping we would finish Genesis last time, but I just couldn't do it without just saying it really fast and being done, which defeats the purpose. So we will finish Genesis and intro Exodus today. And the plan will be, since we're going to finish Genesis today, next week we'll do kind of two separate summaries, the end of Genesis and the start of Exodus. And we'll review all of the summaries we had in the bucket then, going back through all of Genesis. And then the assignment for that week will then be write your own summary from that, ideally from memory if you can, to try to cement that sequence of events in your mind. This is what happens in Genesis. But that'll be for next week. So we'll get to that next week. First off, though, the one we came up with last week, the title was Jacob's family settles in Goshen with Pharaoh's permission as shepherds while famine continues, with Joseph exchanging food for everyone's livestock and buying all their land for Pharaoh except for the land of the priests. Or, the other title, Pharaoh gets extremely rich and Joseph sets his family up for success. So the summary was the Israelites become in charge of all of Pharaoh's livestock. Jacob is 130 years old and Pharaoh asks him, "How old are you?" All the livestock of Egypt and Canaan become Pharaoh's and therefore under the control of the Israelites, and the Egyptians sold themselves and their land to Pharaoh to get food. So that one is going in the bucket. And now, summary of what we went over last time. So the title we got from Julie this week, thank you Julie, was Jacob blesses Manasseh and Ephraim as his own sons. Jacob calls his 12 sons together to give them blessings/prophecies of what will happen in the days to come. Jacob dies and they travel back to Canaan for the burial. So, essentially the death of Jacob is what we had. So what happens first? Genesis, I triple checked the verses this time, so hopefully this is right. Genesis 47:27 was the first verse, and we ended on 50:14. What happens first? Yes?
Jacob blesses claims Manasseh and Ephraim as his own sons.
Very good. Claim. And then he asks them, "Who are you?" Which I thought was really ironic. You're my sons. Who are you again? What's next?
Before that, Jacob makes him swear to take him back to Canaan.
Very good. Makes Joseph swear. Bury him. Okay.
He blesses Joseph.
Jacob blesses Joseph through his sons, I would say. Good. Then what?
He gave extra portions to Joseph. Extra portions of land.
I think next up, all the other sons come in and we do the around the bed blessings, right? I'm going to say he blesses/curses all the other sons.
He put Ephraim ahead of,
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's an important one.
that was right after this.
Okay. Then what? There's a really important blessing in there for Judah. The scepter will not pass from Judah, right? Right. Okay. right. He dies, he's embalmed. We head back to Canaan for the burial. The big parade.
You want to be buried with his ancestors, right?
Hmm?
You want to be buried with his
Yes,
ancestors.
yeah, I'm gonna put that up here in the cave. That Abraham bought, I can say it from memory now, from Ephron the Hittite. I think it usually then says, and the field around the cave, I don't know. We've said it like a million times. That'll come up this week, actually, if we get there. One thing I did forget to mention last time about the embalming, we talked about why Egyptians embalm bodies, right? Because their belief was that their spirit would come back and inhabit the body at night to rest and recharge from the spirit realm, and once that body died, you would die a second time in the spiritual world, and that was their biggest fear. But there's an interesting note that I forgot to point out in our story, that Joseph doesn't have the priests embalm Jacob's body. He has the physicians. So he has his doctors do the embalming. So it's not a pagan embalming ritual like they would have done for Egyptian people. It's just purely practical so that Jacob's body can be hauled around for 70 days before they head to Canaan.
Now, they do that with all the people, or just like
Everybody that's
higher-
reported. They buried the pharaohs in the tombs with in the actual pyramids with all their stuff.
You know that they would even mummify cats.
Yes, they did. They put the pets in there with them so that they could all get together at night and
Yeah.
have a party.
Also, cats they were really sacred in Egypt.
All right. So moving on. So we're going to start back up in Genesis 50, verse 15. Genesis 50, verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him." So they sent a message to Joseph, saying, "Your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because of the evil they did to you. And now, please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father." And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. He cried. Why did he cry? Because after all of this time, where he's taken care of them, he's been nothing but good to them. He cried on their necks when he revealed himself. They still won't trust him. He saved them. And no matter what he does, they will not trust him. And this is where he really realizes it. I mean, I was trying to think of some poetic reference that would help us understand the despair that Joseph feels here at this point. I have done so much for you. I effectively gave my life for you and saved you, and you still can't trust me. And the verse that came to mind was, imagine when they read that letter to Joseph, and he says, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it, how often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." That's what Jesus said to the Jews in Jerusalem in Matthew 23:37. That's the despair Joseph's feeling now, and that's the despair Jesus felt back then. Why won't you just let me save you? Why can't you just trust me? So the Israelites were left in Egypt 400 years until a prophet like Jesus was raised up from among them, and they could say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Moses' life is very much a fractal with Jesus' life. There's a lot of repeated patterns. But the letter is so manipulative. It doesn't say, it could have said something like, please don't hurt us, or we ask you to remember Dad and not hurt us. It doesn't say that. It says, your dad, not our dad, your dad told us to tell you this. We didn't want to tell you this, but he told us we had to tell you, don't hurt us. That's the letter. It could not be more manipulative. So, he cries, and then essentially the brothers think the letter wasn't good enough. We got to show up and actually beg him in person. So his brothers also came and fell down before him and said, "Behold, we are your servants." But Joseph said to them, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. It doesn't say it, but I get the strong feeling that that letter, the message from his dad, was also completely made up. You would think if there was any point where Jacob would have said, "Now boys, remember to tell Joseph," it would have been at the foot of the bed while he's blessing them all, when he never mentions at all that they are the ones that sold Joseph into slavery, right? So I think they completely made this up, and that is the traditional view. They made up this letter, wrote it as manipulative as they could, hoping Joseph wouldn't hurt them. And so they bring up an interesting question here. If it is a lie, is it okay to lie to preserve peace in the family?
No.
To preserve peace in the family.
I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty sure lies usually just lead to more lies until it collapses on itself.
Usually, but let's say you were married and your wife said, "Does this make me look
nope.
fat?"
We already talked about this.
I wouldn't survive that conversation.
Let's say you've been fighting with your siblings and they come home and then they're like, and they ask you something, and the truth would really enrage them and the lie would actually placate them and you guys can get along.
Oh please, anything I would say to them enrages them anyway, so usually my best advice is just not to speak at all and hide in your room.
It is a much harder question than it seems on the surface, right? It seems like the brothers should not have done this. It is the traditional Jewish explanation of this is that the brothers did a good thing in lying to Joseph to preserve peace in the family. That the peace in the family was more important than the truth that they withheld from Joseph when they told this.
No, which, because I know when we talked before, it was like, we talked about like the, and I don't know if it was with you or it was before this class, but we talked about, you know, the different priests had different viewpoints on what came first. So, like, do they think that now because they are under another specific priest viewpoint, or?
So this is something you actually have to ask about everything that we think of as a sin. Where we talked about this before was that we have this mistaken belief that sin as an action is wrong in and of itself, independent of the situation. We think there's absolute right and wrong, and so that means lying is always wrong, murder is always wrong. But the reality is that almost all sins depend on the situation. So if there was the example I used before, if there was a young woman running past you clearly terrified, and a Nazi soldier comes by 30 seconds later and says, "Which way did she go?" Clearly he's intent on doing something awful to her. You don't tell him the truth, right? It would be wrong to tell him the truth. The lie is actually the morally good thing. And so because absolute morality is absolutely situational, you do have to ask these questions. Was it right in this instance? Just because it was right to lie here doesn't mean it was right to lie in another situation. Every situation has its own absolute right and wrong. And we look to the Bible for guidance for how should we rank these things. So I said the Jews themselves, they've spent a long time trying to rank them. It's all just opinion, you know, from what you think those are. I don't agree with them though. I don't think the lie was good here. Because for one reason, it was completely unnecessary. Joseph wasn't going to punish them. If they'd have just told the truth, there would have been greater family peace, right? It was purely their fear of what he was going to do. So I don't think it was right here, but it is important to consider that question. Family peace is really important. It's not as cut and dried as it seems up front, right?
Seems like they're more worried about self-preservation than
Yeah,
family.
It was totally a selfish lie. I agree. So if you look at the motivation, you look at was it necessary, all these things point not in their favor. They point against them. So I would say it was a wrong thing for them
I
to
think
do.
when they first got back together, everything was topsy-turvy. They should have cleared the air and got this all straightened out.
Totally agree.
Because it's festered now for 17 years.
You're right. In fact, it looks like they've gone and lived elsewhere. They haven't really had a lot of contact with Joseph in this time. It seems like he's still this remote monarch kind of
It
person.
feels like Joseph's like, pass it, and it's just been eating on them for years.
Yeah. And I think that's part of why he cried. He's just like, guys, you don't have to feel this way. So I agree with you. You know, some of the examples I had, your mother-in-law comes over and makes a meal, and she's very nervous. She asks you, how do you like the meal? Regardless of how you like the meal, you should say, it was fantastic. Thank you very much.
It's only a little bit expired.
Or actually, the truth may be, that's not my favorite. It's not that it's bad, it's not my favorite. You don't say that. You say, thank you for making it. Your 3-year-old brings you his latest artistic creation out of mud and sticks. Do you like it, Daddy? Yes, I do like it.
Those rock.
But anyways, it's an interesting question. So we'll pick back up 22. Joseph remained in Egypt, he and his father's house. And Joseph lived 110 years. Now this doesn't follow the pattern that I totally screwed the math up on last time. I saw you, Daniel and Kristen, like talking back and forth. And I was like,
It's like,
did I screw that up?
well, because you had 5 plus 5, and I'm like, isn't 5 squared
Yeah.
5 times 5?
Yeah, you should. I had 5 squared plus 7 is what I had. And you guys should have been like, that's not 180. Just rotate this a little bit. It was just an X. It was 5 times 5 times 7. That's 180. So all the pluses were supposed to be times.
Is it? No, it's not. It's 175.
Oh, I'm sorry, 175. 180 was the next one. It's hard to do math in your head while you're presenting. But I will correct the board. There we go. Thank you. See, you called me out that time. You should have called me out last time. You would have really seen me flounder. Wait, what? All right. Anyways. So Joseph, let's see, we were at 110 years old, right? He lived 110 years. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the 3rd generation. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were counted as Joseph's own. So Joseph did the same thing for Manasseh's kids that Jacob did for his. And Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will visit you and bring you up out of this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. So Joseph died, being 110 years old. They embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. And when we get to the Exodus here, and they actually leave Egypt, they actually take 480 years later the bones of Joseph out of Egypt, back to Canaan, and bury them in the tomb that we saw the picture.
So he wasn't a pharaoh, but with him being a higher up, wouldn't they have put him in like a special tomb?
I don't know where they put him, it doesn't say. It just says they put him in a coffin. So
he
if
was
you
like
go
next
into
up
the...
to pharaoh.
Even in the pyramids, there are often multiple bodies, sometimes the servants. Usually though, the pyramids, they would seal up the pyramid after the pharaoh's death. So anybody buried in there was almost certainly died before the pharaoh died. And then the only way it ever gets unsealed is grave robbers later on, like open it up to pull things out and stuff like that. But the dead bodies tend to just be from that. So that's the end of Genesis. Flip the page and we're at Exodus 1. So just to reflect a little bit, we've now been through one book of the Bible in this class. I feel like we've accomplished something. This was good. You guys kept coming, so I hope that means you guys liked it. This was good. I hope, when we started I mentioned that some people think that you sort of turn off your brain when you go to church. I hope you see that this is the deepest writing that mankind has in its possession. There is so much depth, wisdom, philosophy interwoven with stories that actually transcend through history and are repeated. It's one of the most amazing works ever written down, anywhere. It touches on nearly everything important, good and evil, who we are, where we come from, why the world is the way it is, male-female relationships, family dysfunction, man's relationship to God. All the big questions are here in that first book that we just finished. And I hope when we're done, we hang on to that intense desire for God to step in and give the law. We're ready for something to finally say, this is right, this is wrong, all this dysfunction is not the way it's supposed to be, all this sin is not the way it's supposed to be. This is the law. And so where are we now? Like if you recap basically where we're at, one way of understanding the story to this point, you can see it as God's attempts at goodness. I talked about this, I think, when I sold the course early on, that God begins the world. His entire point, I hope you guys see by the time we're done with the Torah, at least, if not the Old Testament, if we get that far, what God cares about is good and evil. That's it. God is good, He wants goodness to happen, and He hates evil, and He hates sin. That's it. The story becomes about redemption because we can't escape evil on our own. But what God wants is no evil and good. The story is about good and evil. It's not about rich and poor. It's not about class strife and envy. It's not like Marx that said all of life is about economics. It's not those things. It's about good and evil. And so God starts with one man, one woman, one sin. We say, God, if you had just made a few less things evil, I could tackle this. But there's so many, I can't not sin. And the first story taught us that even if He only had one rule, and it wasn't even a hard one, just don't eat the one fruit. You got plenty of other fruits. You can eat all this other stuff. Just don't do that. It wasn't even a hard one. And we broke it. And when we broke it, we got a conscience, which was attempt number 2 to bring goodness to the world, to not get evil in this world. And attempt number 2, the conscience, meant we knew what was right and wrong. And the second brother murdered the first brother. Right? Cain murdered Abel. It didn't work. It's not too long until we get to the point that even with conscience, every single human being on earth, all their thoughts are evil all the time. And so God wipes them all out, and we get the third attempt. The third attempt is we start with good genetic stock. He just gets rid of everybody whose genes made them evil, if you think it's environment instead of heredity instead of environment. They're all gone. We picked one guy solely because he was good in his generation. And of course, his son Ham and Canaan get cursed not long after they're off the boat. God also gives them, the Jews have a tradition that He gave Noah 7 Noahide laws, they call it. And since that Noah's family was the only people in humanity at that time, these were 7 laws for all of humanity. They're not all written down in that story, though. There's just a few. One of them is be kind to animals, for example. These are rules, don't murder. That was another one. These are rules for all of humanity. So we got some laws, and we got good genetic stock, and it didn't work. We got through Genesis, right, and we're begging for the law, for God to come in and just tell us what's right and wrong, so that we know for sure. And you could look at that as like, well, but why does God have to try? Didn't He know that this was going to happen? And in this, the tale between man and God, which side of that equation doesn't know what's going to happen? Is it God or is it man? It's man. So the trying is to prove to us that it's not going to work. If Jesus comes to a world that does not understand they can't escape sin on their own, they're not going to accept Him as their Savior because they don't think they need one. Right? And so we've hit the third one. The fourth one here is, I'm going to give my law, and to shepherd it, I'm going to pick one people to be priests to all the nations. And that's the part of the story we're at right now, the story of goodness. These people will be priests to the nations, and their job is to bring the Torah, what we're reading, to the world. Tell the world there is one ultimate God over all of your other local gods, and He cares about goodness. And you need to follow His law. It's strange. The Jews don't want you to become Jewish. They are not an evangelizing sect. They don't see themselves as needing you to become a part of their religion. They're perfectly happy if you will, but that's not their goal. The goal is to be priests to the nations and carry this law to all of the other people. So one of the commentators I like a lot, Dennis Prager, I quote him a lot. I don't always say all the quotes because you just hear me say other people's names the whole class and we wouldn't get through anything. But this one, he had a really good question. If that was the progression, why didn't God just give the 10 Commandments at creation? Why didn't He just give those to us up front? Adam and Eve, here you go, and call it good. I did not like Dennis Prager's answer. But I think the real answer is that because we needed to see this progression. We needed to see it go through those things for it to actually stick with us. It wouldn't have been good enough. We're going to see that the law is not good enough, right? We get to the New Testament, we're going to see that just giving the law did not save anybody. All it did was condemn us. So, when we figure out where we are, that's the summary of things to come, or the summary of things so far regarding goodness. And now we got to wonder, when are we in history? And this is a very hotly debated topic. It is hotly debated whether the Exodus happened. You don't have to worry about that. It happened. Don't worry. But there is a debate about that. But amongst the people who believe the Exodus happened and believe the Bible is true, there are intense debates between whether the Exodus happened in 1446 BC. So it would be right here. So 2000 BC, Abraham, all the way through Joseph, and we hit 1446 BC. Or whether it happened in 1290 BC, right here. First, 1446. 1446 BC reading comes from 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 1. So we don't have to turn there, I'll tell you what it says. It says, in the 480th year after the people of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, which is the 2nd month, that's the month of Passover, he began to build the house of the Lord. So that's our number. We have whenever the temple was being constructed. It was 4 years into Solomon's reign, so Solomon became king 4 years earlier. 480 years before that, that's when the Jews came out of Egypt. And so it's a pretty simple calculation. We actually know when the temple was begun to be constructed. That one we have pretty well down in history. That's one of the core anchor points that when you try to figure everything else out, you can't fix that one to any other time. 970 BC. So if we take 970 BC, we take 4 years off, but since we're BC, taking 4 years off means adding, or means subtracting, right? So we're going to go to 966 BC. And then 480 years earlier gets us to, I should say, Solomon became king in 970, and the temple got created in 4 years later, right? So it was adding 4 years. Then we take off 480 years, 966 plus 480 is 1446. That is the number that aligns with the text that we read. Now the Septuagint says it was 440 years, and the Masoretic text, we learned about those before, says 480 years. That one's very easy to reconcile. It's just sort of about the 80 years, or the 40 years in the desert or not, right? So that one's not really a big deal. 480 is what at most everyone takes that is in the 1446 camp. And it's the one that aligns with the text. And so that's the one that we're going to use in this class. We're going to use the one that aligns with the text. The 1291, all of the arguments are around a verse we're going to read very soon here that says that the Jews helped to build 2 cities, Pithon and Ramses. And Ramses II, over here around 1290 BC, is the one that built the city of Ramses. And so they say that since it says the Israelites helped build Pithon and Ramses, they couldn't have left way back here if the city got built here. So there's a lot of good archaeological evidence that that city got built at that time. But what they don't know, because it was flooded constantly by the Nile Delta, and so they had to move the city not too long after that, they have no idea if something was built there before. And so I'm in the 1446 camp because I don't see that as... There's an explanation for it, right? It's just that they built those cities back then. They weren't called Pithon and Ramses then, but they were by the time we're getting to the point of writing these, of the text that came to us essentially at this time. So it may have used to have been called something else, and then it becomes Pithon and Ramses. I don't see that as being a significant issue.
Does it matter?
I don't think it matters.
Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't know. I didn't know.
Here's why it matters, because some of the things that help explain the text through here actually do relate to the history in Egypt. And so when we get to that, you should just be aware there is debate on whether it was 1290 or whether it was 1446. And so we will get a lot. The 1446 camp has a very strong alignment with what happens in Egyptian history here. And so since we're sticking with that, I'm going to go with that. But I agree with you. Essentially, you just have to shorten the period of Judges if you think 1290. It's not like now the whole Bible's out the window and it's not true. It's true either way. But the other thing I don't like is that those are the people who say when it says 480 years, it doesn't mean 480 years. Those are the people that say all of the years in the Bible are not actually numbers that are correct. They're symbolic. And maybe they are, I don't really know, but I would rather say if it says 480 and we have an explanation that 480 works, that's good for me. Something though that I think a lot of people don't know about Egypt is that when how many of us have seen the movies where the Israelites are building the pyramids? That's generally what we think they did when they were slaves. They built the pyramids. Most people don't know the pyramids were built about 1,000 years before the Israelites ever showed up. There's about 120 of them, and they were all built in a very short period. So by the time the Israelites got there, Moses would have been taking selfies by the pyramids, at this ancient site. That was 1,000 years ago, guys. That's like, we're in 2026. That would be like 1,026. That's how old these things were when they showed up. And so that's important to understand. Egypt as a society had been around for 2,000 years by the time the Jews got there. Okay? They weren't an upstart. They hadn't just been there a little while. They were a massive civilization. They had incredibly sophisticated math. They knew the exact distance from the earth to the sun. They had great astronomy. They had amazing chemistry that we can't even replicate really today. Their embalming practices, you see the mummies, you're like, how did the hair survive? I mean, you see their hair on the mummies. It's crazy. They had engineering to build the structures they built. It was fascinating. I mean, they were an American-style civilization way back in that day. They had a fully developed theology, a very complex religion, 80-some gods in their pantheon, and their political system was this sort of three-legged stool where the power was shared between Pharaoh, the priests, and the military. They had separation of powers, and their political system had already proven stable for 2,000 years. Ours has only been here 250, and most of us think it's on the way out. Like, things aren't going well. Imagine, like, 2,000 years it had already existed, their political system was stable. That's like if the Roman Empire was still here today, and we could go visit it. That would be how stable Rome's government would have proven over that time. So that's the environment that these guys are going into. And another important point is that they were sophisticated. They had all this knowledge, but they were not imperial. You will not see Egypt leave its borders trying to subjugate other peoples. Partly because I think of that separation of powers that they had. The Egyptologists suggest that it is the fact that Pharaoh didn't generally have just absolute authority without the priests and things like that. And it's also because they had everything they needed. They were happy with their gods, they had all the food that they needed, and they just did not have a strong desire to go out and subjugate other peoples. The only time they really leave is when they try to preemptively attack the Assyrians later on in the story, before the Assyrians come and attack them. And so this subjugation of the Hebrews we're about to read is completely out of character for them. That is not what traditionally happened in Egyptian society. They were normally highly civilized. So I thought the best places to go for a summary of where we are, we're going to do summary of Genesis, our own one next week, right? There's two places in the New Testament that have a fantastic summary of what we've gone through so far. First one we're going to go to is Hebrews 11. Let's turn to Hebrews 11 after Paul's letters. Hopefully we know where Hebrews is, since that's what we're going through in our main service. For those of you not familiar, Hebrews 11 is called the Hall of Faith. It's essentially when the writer of Hebrews is outlining that you guys thought it was all about the law for salvation all this time, but you were wrong. It's been about faith. It's been about trusting God this whole time. And he lists all of these people through history who were great representatives of the faith. So Hebrews 11 at the beginning.
We'll get there in about a year.
Yeah,
Talk about that.
that would be more than a year. So we're going to read Hebrews 11, verse 1 through 29. That's how far we're going to go to get to where we're at in the story. So now faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. For by it the people of old received their commendation. By faith we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. By faith Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, through which he was commended as righteous, God commending him by accepting his gifts. And through his faith, though he died, he still speaks. By faith Enoch was taken up, so that he should not see death, and he was not found, because God had taken him. Now before he was taken, he was commended as having pleased God. And without faith it is impossible to please him, for whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. By faith, Noah, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen, in reverent fear, constructed an ark for the saving of his household. By this he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he went to live in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. By faith, Sarah herself received power to conceive, even when she was past the age, since she considered him faithful, who had promised. Therefore, from one man, and him as good as dead, were born descendants as many as the stars of heaven and as many as the innumerable grains of sand by the seashore. These all died in faith, not having received the things promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. For people who speak thus make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. If they had been thinking of that land from which they had gone out, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country, that is a heavenly one. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. By faith Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises was in the act of offering up his only son, of whom it was said, "Through Isaac shall your offspring be named." He considered that God was able even to raise him from the dead, from which, figuratively speaking, he did receive him back. By faith, Isaac invoked future blessings on Jacob and Esau. By faith, Jacob, when dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph, bowing in worship over the head of his staff. By faith, Joseph, at the end of his life, made mention of the exodus of the Israelites and gave directions concerning his bones. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents, because they saw that the child was beautiful, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the approach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. By faith he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover, and sprinkled the blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn might not touch them. By faith the people crossed the Red Sea as on dry land, but the Egyptians, when they attempted to do the same, were drowned. It's a little foreshadowing that'll get us to the end of Exodus right there. I thought that was an excellent summary. May our summary be half as good as that one. That is a summary about faith through the story. Now there's another really good summary, and that's in Acts. So Acts chapter 7. Follower of Christ named Stephen has some people accusing him before the religious leaders that he has been speaking blasphemy against God, against the God of this Torah. And so they bring him before them, basically, and he is preaching for his life, literally. And they're going to end up killing him in the end here. But in the preaching, what he begins with, amongst all of these professors of Torah, right, the guys who know the most about it in there, with an elementary school level lesson for them who have forgotten of what exactly happened back in Genesis. So, chapter 7, and the high priest said, "Are these things so?" And Stephen said, "Brothers and fathers, hear me. The God of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he lived in Haran, and said to him, 'Go out from your land and from your kindred and go into the land that I will show you.' And then he went out from the land of the Chaldeans," that's Babylon, of course, "and lived in Haran. And after his father died, God removed him from there into this land in which you are now living. Yet he gave him no inheritance in it, not even a foot's length, but promised to give it to him as a possession and to his offspring after him, though he had no child. And God spoke to this effect, that his offspring would be sojourners in a land belonging to others, who would enslave them and afflict them 400 years. But I will judge the nation that they serve, said God, and after that they shall come out and worship me in this place. And he gave him the covenant of circumcision. And so Abraham became the father of Isaac and circumcised him on the 8th day. And Isaac became the father of Jacob, and Jacob of the 12 patriarchs. And the patriarchs, jealous of Joseph, sold him into Egypt. But God was with him, and rescued him out of all his affliction, and gave him favor and wisdom before Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who made him ruler over Egypt and over all his household. Now there came a famine throughout all Egypt and Canaan, and great affliction, and our fathers could find no food. But when Jacob heard that there was grain in Egypt, he sent out our fathers on the first visit, and on the second visit Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And Joseph's family became known to Pharaoh. And Joseph sent and summoned Jacob his father and all his kindred, 75 persons in all. And Jacob went down into Egypt, and he died, he and our fathers. And they were carried back to Shechem, and laid in the tomb that Abraham had bought for a sum of silver from the sons of Hamor in Shechem. Now we now know that's not correct, so we will come back to that in a minute, all right? Abraham did not buy the tomb that they laid Jacob in from the sons of Hamor in Shechem, right? We just read through that, so we'll get back to that in a second. But as the time of the promise drew near, which God had granted to Abraham, the people increased and multiplied in Egypt, until there arose over Egypt another king who did not know Joseph. And he dealt shrewdly with our race, and forced our fathers to expose their infants, so that they would not be kept alive. At this time Moses was born, and he was beautiful in God's sight, and he was brought up for 3 months in his father's house. And when he was exposed, Pharaoh's daughter adopted him and brought him up as her own son. And Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and he was mighty in his words and deeds. And when he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brothers, the children of Israel. And seeing one of them being wronged, he defended the oppressed man and avenged him by striking down the Egyptian. He supposed that his brothers would understand that God was giving him salvation by his hand. But they did not understand, and on the following day he appeared to them as they were quarreling, and tried to reconcile them, saying, "Men, you are brothers. Why do you wrong each other?" But the man who was wronging his neighbor thrust him aside, saying, "Well, who made you a ruler and a judge over us? Do you want to kill me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday?" At this retort Moses fled, and became an exile in the land of Midian, where he became the father of 2 sons. And now when 40 years had passed, an angel appeared to him in the wilderness of Mount Sinai in a flame of fire in a bush. And when Moses saw it, he was amazed at the sight. And as he drew near to look, there came the voice of the Lord. "I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham and of Isaac and of Jacob." And Moses trembled and did not dare to look. And then the Lord said to him, "Take off the sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their groaning, and I have come down to deliver them. And now come, I will send you to Egypt. This Moses whom they rejected, saying, 'Who made you a ruler and a judge?' This man God sent is both ruler and redeemer by the hand of the angel who appeared to him in the bush. This man led them out, performing wonders and signs in Egypt and at the Red Sea and in the wilderness for 40 years. This is the Moses who said to the Israelites, 'God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your brothers.'" I know that was a lot. We're going to stop there. So that's a recap, and that's where we're about to go. Now, Stephen. I would not blame Stephen if he's under the threat of being stoned and he decides to give an entire history. You know, I'm sure he said it a lot faster than I did in front of the tribunal here, that he might have gotten a few things mixed up. The problem with that is he's being carried along by the Holy Spirit in this speech, right? So you don't expect the Holy Spirit to be giving him incorrect words. So this is a legit issue for the text that we have to answer. And the reason I'm bringing it up here is I don't want the first place Christians to see questions about the text to be the YouTuber that's telling you how the Bible's all wrong because look at this thing, right? A lot of people see that and assume, well, there's no explanation, so, I have to go. This is one of the hardest ones to reconcile because it seems pretty obvious. So I'll tell you what the different things that we have are for how we interpret where it says Jacob or Abraham bought this from the sons of Hamor. So the first thing to understand is, remember when we started the class, I said the way you interpret Scripture is that you don't take the unclear things and change your interpretation of the clear things, right? This is an unclear thing. We're not sure what this means. And so you ask yourself with the unclear thing, is there another way that it can be read that does make sense with the clear things? Because it's a whole lot harder to overthrow the clear things than it is to just figure out, hey, there's actually a different interpretation of this reading that actually makes sense. So the first option you have is just Stephen got it wrong under pressure. Totally understandable. You can think that. I don't think that that's it, though. And the reason I don't think that's it is because what was the tribunal's main goal in this speech? It was discredit this new sect of Christianity that is coming up and getting all these people to follow it, right? What better way to discredit it is if he makes some elementary mistake to be the professor, to stand up when he's done talking and say, this guy doesn't even know his history. He didn't know Abraham bought that tomb, or bought his tomb from Ephron the Hittite, right? He got it wrong. We know way more than he does, and then they stone him to death. They don't say that, they just stone him to death. So clearly, these professors of Torah did not see what Stephen said as incorrect enough to help them in their cause. So that, to me, is strong enough evidence that it's not just that Stephen got it wrong. Some people explain it by a scribal error, that in the original, it said it correctly, and he got the scribe replaced Jacob's name with Abraham. Because if Jacob's name was where Abraham is, then it's correct. There are scribal errors in the copies of the Bible that we've had over all of the centuries. There's tons of them. The trouble is that we actually know where the errors are at because we have so many copies, so we can trust the text. And so it doesn't change that the autographs were inerrant, if you believe that. The autographs, the originals, were correct. But it's just that a scribe messed it up at some point in time. So you can also believe that, we don't know. But that's not the one I jumped to. To me, that's like the last vestige of something. You're like, I don't know, so the scribe must have got it wrong. Another one that people use, I don't like this one. Apparently in ancient texts, they use a technique called telescoping. And telescoping means they will take a long story and shrink it down and mix and match the facts of the story for brevity. Apparently it happens a lot in ancient texts. I'm not sure Stephen's in the right mind to be like intelligently telescoping the story down. And my biggest problem with telescoping is it's completely untestable. You could claim every single thing that you see that you don't agree with was just telescoping and it means something else instead. You can't test, was I telescoping here or was I not? And so since it's not testable, that may have been it, but I'm not going to go with that one. No, what I'm going to go with, what I think is correct, is in the text right there at 16, verse 16. Verse 14, he just talked about Joseph, right? In the context, he's talking about Joseph, and where was Joseph buried? At Shechem, right? At the tomb at Shechem that Jacob had for him. So if we're going to talk about carrying, he died and our fathers, meaning the ones that came after Joseph, they're carrying them back to Shechem. And they carried Joseph's bones back, and they buried him in Shechem. Like, that's what he's talking about, was burying Joseph there. So then how do you answer that Abraham bought it from the sons of Hamor? Well, first, Abraham can definitely be the name of the entire nation. Okay? Abraham, you could just say, just like we call Israel today, Israel after Jacob, you could just say Abraham. All of his descendants were Abraham. So when Jacob bought it, there was Abraham buying it. Seems like a stretch to me. I actually think it's probably just that that Abraham very well could have purchased that from the earlier ancestors of Hamor, who were also called Hamor. And there was a Jewish tradition back at the time of Stephen that would have held that we've just lost in the last 2,000 years of history. We don't know, because it's not in the scriptures. It doesn't say Abraham bought it from him. But he could have, and if he did, that would explain why did Jacob only ever buy one piece of land in the entire story? That one piece of land at Shechem from the sons of Hamor. Maybe it's because his dad bought it 3 generations earlier, and he wanted to get it back. That would totally make sense of that story then. So, to me, that's what's happening with Stephen here. And I'm sorry I had to take that long aside, so we haven't got to Exodus yet. But since we're right there, surely you guys saw that. I was like, wait a minute, that's not right. We read Ephron the Hittite like 8 million times. And that doesn't mean that the text is incorrect here. So, all right. We're 5 minutes in. I think we're just going to stop there.